Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at a really unique indie called She Remembered Caterpillars. And I have to be perfectly honest, the title alone actually made me skip past the game several times before I finally decided to purchase it and try it out. Because let's be honest, that title says absolutely nothing about the type of game you should be expecting, which is actually pretty darn good if you're a puzzle fan. For those story-driven gamers among us, it's not just 100% puzzles though. Actually, as you play through and solve puzzles, you also start to slowly put together a story of arguably love and loss, which is becoming slightly trite in the indie market, but is actually really well done if you stick with it and play through it. And while the eShop description does actually give us a couple of spoilers into it, it prepares you for nothing that you'll be getting into, so feel free to read away. Because if you actually do take a minute with the game, it's gonna blow your freaking mind. But getting into the actual gameplay, everyone knows what to expect from a puzzle game. You walk around, you push boxes, end of story. But She Remembers Caterpillars is unlike any puzzle game I think I've ever played. It's so poignantly simple, but so incredibly difficult and challenging on a fundamental level that it's as satisfying as it is painful. More or less, you're playing through these puzzles as little creatures called gammies. And these gammies, while starting off in only one color, can navigate across the map to a little exit point. And the further you get in, the more gammies you have on the map, and the more colors they come in, and of course the more exit points you'll have to find, with only one gammie per exit. But while that is absolutely abhorrently simple, where the game actually starts getting challenging is with the other mechanics besides the playable characters. In She Remembers Caterpillars, the main mechanics that keep you from getting to your goal are colored bridges that looks like caterpillars, as well as a couple other decisive mechanics that get tacked on the further into the game you get with the ever-increasing difficulty, and I do mean difficulty. I'm pretty good at puzzle games, and there were more than a few that just really had me wondering if there was a bug, until I eventually stared at it for so long that I figured it out. But back to the simplicity of the game mechanics themselves. If you have a red little character, it can cross a red bridge. And if you have a blue character, it can cross a blue bridge. But if you have both characters, you can merge them together and it would be a purple character at that point for red and blue. And that purple character can both cross purple bridges and red bridges and blue bridges. And of course, you can merge and divide any character, any color of character together or separate them at any point in the game anytime you want. And so after only a handful of introductory levels, the puzzling mechanic actually becomes an incredibly strategic and tactical game of how to combine colors to move across bridges and divide and conquer to get each of the small little characters to each of the possible exit points. And after only a few levels, you'll be merging colors into oranges and greens and purples, and there'll be new gates thrown in with bridges that allow a certain color to cross, but gates that won't allow that color to pass. Moving into even deeper mechanics of the ability to remove and change colors. And of course the ever popular puzzling mechanic of switches and bridges. And yes, the game actually does get a little bit more complicated than that, but I'm going to leave that to the hardcore gamers that actually make it that far. Overall though, as I've said before, the gameplay mechanics are incredibly simple. You pretty much just play with colors. Matching colors or contrasting colors, blending and dividing colors. But one of the coolest things is actually, strangely enough for a puzzle game, the visual presentation of She Remembers Caterpillars. It is an intensely cerebral puzzle game because it is so simple. The puzzles have to be incredibly complex to be even remotely challenging. And one thing that I love that developers do is they use a visual aesthetic that just kind of mutes the player's frustration. And in this game in particular, the backgrounds have this really amazing surrealistic Alice in Wonderland kind of ephemeral vibe to them, but the actual characters themselves just prance along and derp across the screen. And I caught myself laughing at them several times, just how goofy and comical they are. And those amazing visuals contrasted with the stark and very poignant story underlying the entire game creates a very vivid contrast that really makes the entire experience quite unique. Which is one of the reasons I said you've probably never played a game like this. The audio as well does deserve some note, because just as serene and surreal as the visual presentation is, the audio package that accompanies it is stellar. The whole time you're playing the game, as you're discovering what's going on, you're poking around in this strange and even slightly to a point off-putting world, where every turn is another mystery and another puzzle to solve, and the music in the game keeps you locked in that subtle level of anxiety, just further driving home the mystery of the entire game. And one thing that I particularly love besides the audio soundtrack is actually the sound effects. Every time you blend or separate a character, every time you bounce down a step or get rejected by a bridge, there is a unique sound effect which just adds to the whole haptic nature of the puzzle game. And if you are a person who doesn't need me to explain what the word haptic means, then you're probably someone who plays mobile games or in touchscreen, and yes, in She Remembers Caterpillars, you actually can play very well in touchscreen. Which does actually bring me to the game's first and possibly its only critique, and that is the game's controls. In She Remembers Caterpillars, the gammies that you play around with are goofy little bouncy sprites that are pretty much, at least to me, the comic relief of the game. But moving them around each of the single-screen puzzle areas is a bit hectic. Each of the levels sits on a pretty much two-dimensional grid plane, meaning that you move each of these characters left or right or back or forth, but using the left joystick to do so seems a bit squishy, a bit floaty, and it can cause you to move your characters into squares that you just came from, or get bounced off of a bridge 2 or 3 times, or just take way more time or energy than you need to move your characters around. But other than that, the control issues were a really minor issue, and like I mentioned before, if I were playing in touchscreen mode or in handheld, those issues would not have existed in the first place. And especially when compared with the raw quality of the puzzles, the unique ingenuity behind the whole game, the story, the graphics, and the audio, even with some slight frustration from some floaty controls, it is completely forgivable given the quality of the game. But possibly one more thing to note is the difficulty level of She Remembers Caterpillars, and that is that the game does actually get quite challenging even for somebody who considers themselves to be a bit of a veteran puzzler. There is the potential for someone who's playing the game strictly for the story to find themselves so caught up in the puzzles that they either A, lose track of where they were, or B, kind of give up because it's difficult and don't ever get to figure out what the story was. And so in that sense, while I would actually encourage everyone to play this game, especially while it's on sale for 99 cents, a word of caution to more story-driven gamers that aren't really fans of the puzzling genre. This is a puzzle game, all out, no holds barred. But if you are a fan of the puzzling genre, this game, I consider it to be a must-have. But that being said, puzzle games in general, and especially puzzle games with stories that I don't want to spoil, do make for pretty short reviews. So that does actually bring us to the end of the review for She Remembers Caterpillars, now on the Nintendo Switch. So if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw us a comment or a like to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. There are thousands of indie games out there, and new and unique ones are coming out every single day. So whether it's an easy hard pass or an unforgettable gem, chances are if it's on the eShop, you're going to find out about it right here. But anyway, this has been The Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.